Evelyn sat across from her husband, Daniel, her hands tightly gripping the edges of the dining table. She avoided his eyes as she spoke, her voice steady but cold. I don't love you anymore, Daniel. The spark between us is gone. I've met someone else, and I want a divorce. Daniel froze. For a moment, he thought he had misheard her. Evelyn, what are you saying? He asked, his voice trembling. I'm saying this marriage isn't working for me anymore, she replied bluntly, her tone sharper now. I've fallen in love with someone else. Daniel's heart shattered into pieces. But Evelyn, we've been together for 8 years. We have a daughter. For God's sake, how can you just throw it all away? I've thought about this for a long time, Daniel, Evelyn said, her gaze finally meeting his. I don't want to fight or argue. You can keep Mia. I know you'll take good care of her. I need to do this for me. Daniel's hands shook as he reached for hers, but she pulled away. Please, Evelyn, don't do this. Think about Mia. She needs her mother. She'll be fine, Evelyn said, standing up and folding her arms. I'm not going to drag her into this. You're a great father, and she's better off with you. Daniel stared at her, searching for any sign of remorse or hesitation, but her face was cold and resolute. Is this man worth leaving your family for? He whispered. Yes, she said, her voice firm. He makes me feel alive in ways I haven't felt in years. I can't keep living this lie, Daniel. I'm sorry. Daniel dropped his head into his hands. He didn't know how to respond. All he could think about was Mia, their sweet, innocent daughter, who had no idea her world was about to fall apart. Evelyn picked up her bag, her decision final. I'll pack my things tomorrow, she said, heading for the door. Goodbye, Daniel. As the door closed behind her, Daniel sat in stunned silence, his mind racing with questions. What went wrong? How long had this been going on? Who was this man she had fallen for? Unbeknownst to Evelyn, her decision would soon lead to consequences she couldn't imagine. 6 months earlier, Evelyn sat at her desk in the quiet office where she worked as an executive assistant. The routine of her life had begun to weigh on her. A husband who was too kind to argue, a daughter who adored her but demanded constant attention, and days that blurred into monotonous cycles of chores, work, and small talk. Daniel, her husband, was a good man, reliable, gentle, and predictable. He loved Evelyn and their daughter, Mia, with all his heart. But for Evelyn, their marriage felt like a room she couldn't breathe in. There was no excitement, no passion, just the dull comfort of knowing exactly what each day would bring. It was during a late lunch meeting that Evelyn first met Ryan. He was a new client, a confident, well-dressed man in his early 40s with sharp features and an easy smile. Evelyn noticed how his attention lingered on her just a little longer than necessary. Evelyn, right? He asked, shaking her hand. His grip was firm, and his gaze felt like it was peeling away layers of her facade. You're not just the assistant here, are you? You seem too sharp for that. She laughed lightly, flattered by the compliment. Just doing my job, she replied, brushing off the comment. But she couldn't ignore the warmth that spread through her chest. In the weeks that followed, Ryan became a regular visitor to her office. Their interactions grew more personal. Harmless banter, long conversations about life, and moments where Evelyn found herself laughing in a way she hadn't in years. He was everything Daniel wasn't. Spontaneous, exciting, and bold. One Friday afternoon, after a meeting ran late, Ryan invited her to join him for a drink. You work too hard, he said with a smirk. Let me buy you a glass of wine. You deserve it. Evelyn hesitated. She thought of Daniel at home, probably preparing dinner and playing with Mia. But then she thought of the empty feeling that had been gnawing at her for months. One drink wouldn't hurt, she told herself. That evening, as she sipped her wine, Ryan leaned in closer. You're incredible, Evelyn, he said, his voice low. I don't know how someone like you ended up stuck in such an ordinary life. His words struck a chord. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt seen. She didn't stop him when he reached for her hand, and by the end of the night, she didn't resist when he kissed her. Evelyn went home that night filled with guilt but also exhilaration. She told herself it was a mistake, that it wouldn't happen again. But it did. One lunch turned into another drink, then late-night texts, and eventually stolen weekends. Ryan made her feel alive, desired, and adventurous. Everything she felt had been missing in her marriage. But deep down, Evelyn knew she was crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Daniel, ever trusting and loving, didn't notice the distance growing between them. He chalked up her late nights to work stress and her quiet moods to exhaustion. As her affair with Ryan deepened, Evelyn convinced herself that she deserved this happiness. She reasoned that she wasn't hurting Daniel or Mia. She was just reclaiming a part of herself that had been lost in the monotony of marriage and motherhood. What Evelyn didn't know was that the man she was falling for had his own secrets. Evelyn's affair with Ryan grew into a whirlwind of passion and secrecy. They met at hotels, exchanged flirty messages, and spent hours together in a bubble where reality didn't exist. Ryan made her feel like the woman she used to be, carefree and full of life. She convinced herself that what they had was special, something she hadn't felt with Daniel in years. At home, Evelyn tried to act normal, but cracks began to show. Daniel, who had always trusted her without question, noticed the small changes. She spent more time on her phone, often smiling at messages she wouldn't share. She started coming home later, giving vague excuses about work deadlines or errands. "Mia's been asking for you," Daniel said one evening when she walked in late. He had already put their daughter to bed. His tone was gentle, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I know. I'm sorry," Evelyn said, kissing him on the cheek. "Work's been crazy." Daniel smiled faintly, choosing to believe her. He didn't want to imagine that his wife could be lying. But Evelyn's guilt began to eat at her. Mia's innocent questions. "Why are you always so busy, Mommy?" And Daniel's unwavering kindness felt like weights pressing down on her chest. Still, when Ryan's name lit up her phone, the guilt melted away. "I can't stop thinking about you," Ryan texted one night. "I feel the same," Evelyn replied, her heart racing. Ryan had a way of making her forget everything else. With him, there were no dirty dishes, no crying toddlers, no endless routines. There was only the thrill of something new, something forbidden. One weekend, Ryan surprised her with a trip to a secluded beach. Evelyn told Daniel she had a work conference out of town, and he didn't question her. As they walked along the shore, Ryan took her hand. "I've never felt like this with anyone," he said, looking into her eyes. Evelyn felt her heart swell. "Me neither," she whispered, convinced that this was what love was supposed to feel like. But the cracks in their perfect affair started to appear. Ryan never talked about his life outside of their time together. He was vague about his job and often avoided questions about his weekends. Evelyn dismissed it at first, not wanting to ruin what they had. But as her feelings for him deepened, she began to crave more. "Do you ever think about us? About the future?" she asked him one evening as they lay in bed. Ryan smiled but didn't answer right away. "Let's just enjoy what we have," he said, brushing her hair away from her face. The answer stung, but Evelyn didn't press him. She convinced herself that he needed time, that he would eventually want the same things she did. Back home, Daniel grew more concerned. He noticed how distant Evelyn had become, how she avoided his touch and barely spoke to him. One night, as they sat in silence on the couch, he finally asked, "Is everything okay? Evelyn, you've seemed different lately." "I'm fine," she said quickly, avoiding his gaze. "I'm just tired." Daniel nodded, but the unease in his chest didn't go away. He loved Evelyn deeply and wanted to believe that their marriage was still strong. But something told him that the woman he loved was slipping away. Meanwhile, Evelyn began to wrestle with her own emotions. She hadn't planned to fall in love with Ryan. It was supposed to be a fling, a way to escape the monotony of her life. But now she couldn't imagine going back to the way things were. She told herself that she deserved this happiness, that it wasn't wrong to want more from life. But the more she tried to justify her choices, the more tangled her emotions became. Unbeknownst to Evelyn, Ryan's detachment wasn't just casual indifference. It was a carefully guarded secret that would soon shatter her illusions. Evelyn's decision to ask for a divorce was not sudden. It had been building for weeks. She had convinced herself that staying in her marriage was unfair to both her and Daniel. How could she go on pretending when her heart belonged to someone else? One evening, after another magical day with Ryan, Evelyn lay in bed replaying his words. "You're special to me, Evelyn," he had said. "You deserve to be truly happy." She took it as a sign that he felt the same way she did, that their connection was more than just an affair. The next morning, she woke up determined. She couldn't keep living a double life. If Ryan was her future, then she had to leave Daniel behind. She didn't tell Ryan about her plan. Instead, she waited until Daniel returned from work, their daughter Mia playing with her blocks in the living room. Evelyn's hands shook as she sat Daniel down and broke the news. Now, days after leaving Daniel devastated and their daughter in tears, Evelyn was living on a high of newfound freedom. She hadn't spoken to Daniel since the night she walked out, certain she had made the right choice. But Ryan's reaction was not what she expected. "You told him what?" Ryan asked, his tone sharper than she'd ever heard before. They were seated at a quiet restaurant, their usual meeting spot. "I told Daniel I want a divorce," Evelyn said, smiling nervously. "I'm ready to move forward with you." Ryan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "Evelyn, I didn't ask you to do that." "I know," she said quickly, "but I couldn't keep lying to him. This is what we both want, isn't it? To be together." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Look, I care about you, but I never said anything about leaving my life behind. What we have is great, but it works because we keep things simple." Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. "Simple? Ryan, I left my husband for you. I thought we—" "Don't do this," Ryan interrupted, lowering his voice. "I told you from the beginning that I don't want complications. I'm not looking for a long-term thing." Evelyn stared at him, her chest tightening. "You said I deserved to be happy. You made me believe we had a future together." Ryan sighed, leaning forward. "Evelyn, I never lied to you. I've been honest about where I stand. I can't give you what you're asking for." Her hands trembled as she clutched her glass. "So what are you saying? That this is it?" Ryan looked at her with a mix of pity and detachment. "I'm saying we need to stop. This has gone too far." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as she tried to process his words. "You're leaving me? After everything I've given up for you?" "I'm sorry," Ryan said, standing up. "I didn't mean for this to hurt you, but I can't keep doing this. I'm getting married tomorrow." The words hit her like a freight train. She blinked at him, sure she had misheard. "What?" "I'm marrying someone I've been with for years," Ryan said, avoiding her gaze. "I can't start my marriage with lies. Whatever we had, it has to end." Evelyn's world shattered. She sat frozen, watching as Ryan walked away without looking back. That night, Evelyn returned to the apartment she had rented, her mind racing. The realization of what she had done, destroying her marriage, abandoning her daughter, all for a man who didn't even want her, hit her like a tidal wave. She grabbed her phone and typed out a message to Daniel but deleted it before sending. What could she say? How could she face him now? In the silence of her empty apartment, Evelyn finally understood the depth of her choices. She had traded everything she had for a dream that never existed. Evelyn sat alone in the dimly lit apartment she had rented, her heart heavy with regret. Days had passed since Ryan's betrayal, but the pain lingered, sharper than ever. She had thrown away her marriage, her family, and her stability for a man who never truly cared for her. The silence in the apartment was deafening. No sounds of Mia's laughter, no comforting presence of Daniel. Just her, surrounded by the wreckage of her choices. Unable to bear the loneliness, Evelyn picked up her phone and dialed Daniel's number. Her hands trembled as the call connected. "Hello." Daniel's voice was cautious, distant. "Daniel," Evelyn began, her voice cracking. I need to talk to you. Please." There was a long pause before he replied. "What is there to talk about, Evelyn? You made your choice." "I know I hurt you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was selfish and blind, and I threw away everything we had. I've made the biggest mistake of my life, Daniel. Please, can we meet?" Just once. After another silence, Daniel sighed. Fine. Tomorrow. But don't think this changes anything. The next day, Evelyn sat nervously at a coffee shop, waiting for Daniel. When he arrived, his face was calm but devoid of the warmth she once took for granted. I'm here, he said, sitting across from her. Say what you need to say. Daniel, she started, struggling to find the words. I don't know where to begin. I've realized how much I've hurt you, how much I've destroyed. You and Mia mean everything to me, and I was too blind to see it. I thought I needed more, but I didn't realize I already had everything I could ever want. Please, forgive me. I want to come home. Daniel's expression didn't change. Evelyn, do you know how much you've hurt Mia? She keeps asking why you don't come to tuck her in anymore. She doesn't understand why her mother walked away. His voice cracked, but he quickly composed himself. And me? I begged you, Evelyn. I pleaded with you to think about us, about our family. But you chose him. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face. I was wrong. I see that now. I don't expect it to be easy, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. Please, Daniel. Daniel shook his head. You don't get it, do you? You didn't just betray me, Evelyn. You destroyed the trust, the foundation of everything we built together. I don't think I can ever look at you the same way again. Daniel, please, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm filing for divorce, he said firmly. It's over, Evelyn. I've made peace with that. My priority now is Mia, and making sure she grows up in a stable, loving environment. I don't think you're ready to be part of that anymore. Evelyn's heart sank. You can't mean that. We've been together for 8 years. I made a mistake, but it wasn't a mistake. Evelyn, Daniel interrupted. It was a choice. And now I'm making mine. He stood up, his face a mixture of pain and resolve. Take care of yourself, Evelyn. As Daniel walked away, Evelyn felt the weight of her actions settle over her like a suffocating blanket. She had gambled everything and lost. In the weeks that followed, the divorce went through swiftly. Evelyn watched from a distance as Daniel and Mia rebuilt their lives without her. She tried to be involved, but her presence only reminded Daniel of the pain she had caused. Evelyn sank deeper into regret. She often replayed moments from their marriage in her mind. The quiet nights they spent talking, the laughter they shared, the joy of raising Mia together. She had taken it all for granted, chasing a fleeting thrill that cost her everything. Evelyn spent the rest of her days haunted by the choices she had made. No matter how much she wanted to turn back time, the damage was done. She realized too late that the love and stability Daniel had given her were irreplaceable. Some lessons come at too high a cost, and Evelyn learned hers in the loneliest way possible, by losing the people who had loved her most.